I've covered two different lost American civilizations on this channel before, the Mississippians and the Hopewellians. Today I am once again going to talk about another lost Native American civilization, but unlike the previous two, we're going to look towards the American Southwest, and we're going to talk about the Ancestral Puebloans. According to archaeological evidence, the Ancestral Puebloans were a cultural group that seems to have begun around the year 1500 BCE. Human habitation in the region had been around before that, but the year 1500 is so important because this is when agriculture started to really take shape in the region with the introduction of maize. Around the year 750 CE, the region's people began to create mud domiciles that we today associate with the Puebloan people. The region in which they inhabited, the American Southwest, is today a very arid place with a wide variety of topography, including parts of the Great Basin, the western Great Plains, deserts, shrubland, mesas, and mountains, and forests. Several large rivers run through this area, including the Colorado, Rio Grande, and the Pecos River. While today the region is very arid and receives rainfall and monsoonal events, evidence suggests that the environment was wetter when the ancestral Puebloans settled the land. Not by too much, as both now and back then summer rain was unpredictable and snowmelt provided most of their water, but regardless, archaeology does tend to point towards there being more water available for use than there is in the region today. This is important when discussing the structures that the Puebloan people back then built. The ancestral Puebloans built large structures near or inside large cliff walls to cope with the hot temperatures and for defense from raids into their territory. These structures, called pueblos by the Spanish explorers later on, are the hallmark characteristic of this ancient civilization and can be found dotting the landscape in the American Southwest, with at least 8 sites being preserved as national parks in the United States. These settlements provided a fortified and protected area from the elements and raiders. Many of these settlements were only accessible when using ropes to climb or were just very difficult locations to reach physically. The settlement patterns and the cliff wall domicile buildings have fascinated me the most about this civilization and have been something that I've researched and learned about and want to visit. I've learned about this for over 10 years and I cannot wait for the day that I can visit these places in person. We know a lot about the people who inhabited these old villages because of the preservation of so many of these sites. Compared to the eastern United States, which receives rainfall and has humid conditions that do not lead well to the preservation of wooden architecture the mud and stone construction and hot, arid climate of the Southwest meant that these cities, while abandoned, did not fade away as easily. Sure, the wood that was used and the thatch weaving are gone, but the stone structures, the rock paintings, and the pottery from that time are still around and can easily be studied. We have very good artifacts from places built with adobe mortar, and these structures still tell the story of the people who lived there. One structure in particular I want to talk about is the Great House. In Chaco Canyon National Park, what is now present-day northwestern New Mexico, there are the remains of multiple large complexes called Great Houses. These settlements typically sit at large plateaus that overlook the surrounding regions. The Great Houses served as royal quarters, trade hubs, and large central cities for the surrounding region. These settlements inside Chaco Canyon and in the surrounding region were connected by a large road network that all converged at the Pueblo Alto Great House. The road network is considered to be important for 3 main reasons. The first is that they were used as trade routes between settlements, because back then there were the large Great House settlements that were kind of like the capitals of those regions, and then because of the agriculture practiced by the people, there were small hamlets and towns surrounding the entire region, and that's where we still have these archaeological sites today. Then, they were used to transport all the wood needed to build the Great Houses, which I read could take up to 200,000 trees to make just one of these gargantuan buildings, and that they would be dragged and transported up to 70 miles or around 105-ish kilometers away. That is an unfathomable amount of trees. The region inhabited by the Ancestral Puebloans were a developed agriculture society with a thriving trading economy, receiving goods from as far away as central Mexico, and that is the third reason that these roads were so important. They interconnected everything and allowed for trade both inside of the civilization, going north, west, east, and then especially south coming from Mesoamerica. And yet, by the year 1300, everything had been abandoned. The irrigation ditches were dry, and the once sprawling metropolises were abandoned and left to disappear into the desert. Why? As with the Mississippians, who also disappeared around this time, the leading theory is that of climate change. Archaeological records and scientific data point to a wide-scale drought that lasted about 300 years in North America. Less rain and snowmelt meant that the region could no longer support the widespread agriculture that had made it so vibrant. There is also archaeological evidence that widespread warfare erupted across the region. It's not that war hadn't happened before. The Ancestral Pueblo were in constant conflict with raiding tribes who oftentimes raided into the land, but there is an uptick around different settlements, pointing to conflict inside the civilization. This is a little speculative on my part, but I can definitely see a scenario where as the water began to dry up, as crops began to fail and became less available, that there were different city-states or tribes that attacked each other to get their hands on those resources as they became rare. By the time the Spanish arrived into the region, the modern-day Pueblo tribes had formed. What I find so interesting is that the present-day tribes, such as the Hopi, are a mixture of the different tribes that migrated out of the original cities towards the south. And in many cases, different familial groups are able to trace back their ancestry to the different groups that used to live in the different great houses around their region. Many of the original beliefs and practices of the Ancestral Puebloans and then the modern-day Pueblo have survived to the present day, and this characteristic is very rare considering that most Native American history has been lost completely due to all the tribes of a specific culture going extinct. It is because of the preservation of so many different artifacts and beliefs and domiciles that we are able to really piece together what life was like for the Ancestral Puebloans even before the modern tribes today existed. I hope you enjoyed this video of lesser known history. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful day.